Hello and welcome to Pots and Trowels, and thank you to our sponsors Mr Fothergill Seeds and Cobra Garden. Today I'm going to pop into the polytunnel to show you what's happening with the tomatoes, and I'm also going to show you how we control the weeds in the garden using a hoe. Well, the tomatoes are doing fairly well in the polytunnel. It just gives them that little bit of protection. Certainly this year they've had a bit of a strange start. It was very hot when they went in. We had that intense heat in here, then we've had cold weather, followed by reasonable weather now. So they've been up and down a bit, but overall they're growing well. I've got some in self-watering pots, some in large 10-litre pots, and then a couple planted in the ground just to do a comparison really. They're all growing okay. A mixture of different types, and you can see we're starting to get some nice fruits developing now on the trusses, and this particular one, like most of them, have got 6 or 7 trusses. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and this one is just producing its 7th truss there, so a little bit of growing to do. The ones on the back here are a little bit taller. These are in the self-watering pots, and I find they do tend to get a little bit taller faster. Again, mixture of varieties. This is a lovely sort of plum cherry type, and then round ones in here, and they're getting quite big now, and we're getting towards the end of July, which is when I like to stop them growing. And the reason for that is if you just let them carry on growing, it would just keep going over the roof of the polytunnel, but the fruits at the top won't have enough time to develop and ripen by the time we get to the end of September, October. So I normally stop them, but before that what I need to do is to make sure that they are tied to their support. So I use canes, so it is just a case of making sure that they're tied firmly, and I always loop it around the cane twice like that and then tie it off, and that just stops it slipping and it holds it fairly tight. We don't want to do it too tight that we cut in to the stem, but tight enough like that. So that's holding that for when we get the weight of the fruit. The other thing you need to do as well is make sure that the side shoots are taken out, and they're the little growths that develop between the main stem and the leaf, and there is one just around here that I'm just going to snap off. So it's just very simple, just get them between your fingers and the thumb and just snap them off like that. And there's another one on this one up here that I've spotted. We do it sort of every couple of days if we see them, and just literally snap them off. So they want to go on the compost heap, so I'll put them there. So that's tied in position, and I've got my 6 or 7 trusses. So what I'm going to do now is take the top out of it, and I just use a knife. You can use secateurs, scissors, whatever. I'm going to allow this top truss to develop because it's going to have some fruit on, and then I always count 1 or 2 leaves above it. So 1, 2, and the reason for that is, and then just cut through it, these leaves continue to draw food and moisture up the plant that will feed this last truss. So doing that end of July or early August means that hopefully instead of loads of green tomatoes at the end of the summer, they will all get chance to ripen, and I like them better when they're red. The other thing that you should be doing at this time of the year, if I just step out, is to feed. And you need to feed with a high potash tomato fertilizer on a weekly basis. Sometimes you can do it twice if you want, do a half strength. I tend to do it just the once on a full strength, so it's mixed up, and it's just a case of, this is over and above the watering that you do on a maybe daily basis, but I'm just going to make sure that they get a really good soaking once or twice a week with the mix like that, and that will give them all the nutrients that they need to feed them, to keep them growing, to help the fruits develop and swell, but more importantly ripen. That's what the potash does. So it's just a case now of maintenance to keep them ticking over, and you'll be rewarded with the lovely fruits. And I've just spotted a couple of lovely red ones down here, so I'm just going to take those off, and I think a little bit of Wensleydale cheese and a couple of these Tigerella tomatoes will be absolutely wonderful for my lunch. But before that, we've got to pop back outside. I'm often asked how we control the weeds in our garden, and the simple answer is we use a hoe. Both Jill and I have got a hoe that we use, and we just tickle through the borders on a regular basis, and that way we don't allow the weeds to establish flower and produce seed. And there is an old saying in gardening that 1 year's seed is 7 years weed, because that seed stays in the ground for a long time. So this is my hoe. It's just basically a flat blade. It's got a sharp edge at the front and back, so it cuts through the weeds whichever way I push it through the border. And the idea is you just skim it under the surface of the soil. It's quite a tall hoe mine is, so I can reach right into the back of the borders without standing on the soil. Jill, on the other hand, has got a shorter one. This is a true Dutch hoe. That is the shape of a Dutch hoe, and the cutting edge is along the top there, and that is what cuts the weeds as you push that through the soil. And she's had this donkey's years, and you can see she's used it so much. I encourage her to weed as often as she can, where she's worn the paint off the handle, and only when all that paint has gone will I buy her a new one of those. The other type of hoe that you might see in the garden centres is this one. This is what we call a swan neck hoe, and you wouldn't really use this for this type of weed control, because this is more of a chopping action, and I use this more in the vegetable garden for earthing up around leeks and potatoes. So I'm going to put that one out of the way, and the way you do it is, I'll use Jill's, I don't think she'll mind, is to hoe on a regular basis. Now there aren't any weeds in this border just here, but the principle is what you do is you just put the hoe on the surface and you just shuffle it backwards and forwards in that sort of motion. Now if there are any weeds in there, it would obviously just chop through them, leave them on the surface, and they would wither away in the sunshine. This is not the best day for doing it because it's just started to rain, as you can probably see, but it's just a case of going around on a dry day around all the plants and just hoeing the surface of the soil like that. And then what we do when it gets to the edge, we just flip the hoe over like that, and then you can just rake it around the edge and it just leaves it nice and neat. You might think, well, is that going to dry the soil out? In effect, what it does is create a dust mulch, and a dust mulch is when the top layer about 1 inch is dry and it's moist below. It insulates the soil, and if I just scratch this soil away here, we can see that it's, although it looks dry on the surface, there's lots of moisture down there, and that's why it's important when you hoe, you don't go deep. We're not digging the soil, we are just sliding it along the surface, and if you do that every week or every fortnight, you'll be able to keep your borders nice and clean, and it's great exercise as well. Well, thank you for watching Pots and Trowels, and thank you for all your likes and shares that you give us. Next time I'm going to be checking the cucumbers and tidying up the hostas, so we'll see you then. Bye.